Welcome back to another video, fellow book lovers. Today I'm gonna wrap up the books, the graphic novels and the manga that I read in the month of November. Because I've not read a lot, I decided to pack it all into one video. So I would like to start with the novels that I read. So first I'm gonna talk about The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I've made a sort of weekend reading vlog around it. I did not finish the book during the vlog, but I came very fast. So if you're interested in watching me slowly losing it with this book, I will link the video down below. This book by Riley Sager is about a widowed alcoholic named Casey. She also is an actress and she lives in a house at a lake. And now, due to boredom and attempts to distract herself, she is spying on the neighbors. This obviously lets her witness events that she interprets the worst into. And yes, this does sound familiar. I don't know if you too have read The Woman in the Window, but this is basically the same premise, just exchanging the house at a lake to an apartment in a building. This book, however, is not comparable, and I've heard that people fall into two categories with this book. Either you are kind of enjoying the freshness of the twist and really liking it, or you think it's completely disastrous. I do myself fall in the second category. Now, I think that Riley Sager was very aware of the fact that readers know thrillers by now. They are contemplating their own solutions and their own theories all of the time, and everybody is a suspect. So she did a twist that no one was capable of foreseeing. I actually do think that this could have worked if the writer was just a bit more careful with the execution. However may I feel about the twists, the other aspects that did shape my opinions were also the characters, mainly Casey. First of all, she was almost unbearably annoying, to me, to say it nicely, and that's a bad sign for a main character. She also multiple times throughout the book contradicted herself and kept on forgetting information that she already was told. It made her look really stupid, or at least a victim to her alcohol disease. Casey isn't the only character that I had my fair share of mental disputes with, but she's definitely the one that I want to mention since she is, as I said, the main character of the story. I would still, however, not say that this is unreadable. There's a certain entertainment aspect in that. If you have too much time on your hand and you just wanna, I don't know, give this a try, who am I to tell you not to? Then I have read All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, which I've also made a dedicated video on, but it unfortunately contains spoilers, so I would like to talk about it separately on here. This is about Fuyuki Irie, a freelance proofreader who struggles with loneliness and feelings of not being self-determined. This tells its story on solitude and light in a very, very subtle and slow way, and only in the end the reader is able to grasp the full picture of it. This has a distinct flair to it, and I reckon that it's not gonna be everybody's taste. It seems to not say much at first, and sometimes it is hard to understand what kind of point Kawakami tried to make here. Which is not to say that this is a difficult read. It's actually pretty easy to follow, but still there is something about the scenes that does not speak to everybody. To me it did, which is why I found it fantastic. Okay, now let's move to graphic novels. First, I'm just gonna mention Go Tanabe's The Shadow Out of Time. I'm not gonna talk about it. I have two other wrap-ups where I'm talking about Tanabe and his work a little bit more detailed. So if you're interested, maybe just check out my October wrap-up. And then I did read Gaia, which is, as they say on the internet, the debut manga of very young but very talented mangaka Asagi Yaenaga. Now, for everybody who didn't know, Gaia is the goddess that represents planet Earth in Greek mythology. I'm gonna be very, very honest here and say that the message, like the conclusion of the whole story, just went a bit over my head. I think that there were just one or two chain pieces missing for me to understand the overall conclusion, and then the meaning of the story kind of got lost to me, and I could not find any explanations throughout my research, so I'm still clueless about it. So if you know a thing or two about this story, Please enlighten me, I would love that. Anyways, this is just a minor critique. I still enjoyed this pretty much, and I was able to follow until, as I said, about 2 or 3 pages until the ending. Like, the part that I read and understood to me was very, very enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to any other works of the author that also got translated. I also know that there are some stories that got released in magazines, but unfortunately I can't read them. My Japanese is just not good enough. Then I read 3 other books by Hino Hideshi. As I promised, I tried to look further into his works, and in November I read Bug Boy, which I currently have not with me, the collection Part 1, and Black Cat. So by now I know that the Manga Terror series is not a connected story, but can be enjoyed separately. However, there are themes that are reoccurring in the stories, as Hideshi is also reflecting on his own biography and weaving aspects of his life into the fictional stories. So let's talk about Bug Boy first. The story reminded me a bit of Kafka's Metamorphosis. The boy in the story does not get transformed into a bug, he gets transformed into a caterpillar. And also the story moves a little bit beyond the transformation. By the way, I have not read Metamorphosis yet. Forgive me if I do make any mistakes, I'm just going off of what I know. The Bug Boy shows some allegories on the topic of growing up and the fear of not being loved by your family, which is a common theme with Hideshi. He oftentimes seems to write his stories from the perspective of somebody who is helpless, like for example a child or a black cat. The black cat in the story becomes a silent observer of 3 individual tragic destinies. This does play on the superstitious stereotype that black cats bring bad luck. And you know, I am probably not the only person thinking this, but my fear going into this was that there would be a lot of animal cruelty. I really don't like that in my horror volumes, and I think that's where many people do draw the line. So I'm sure I'm not the only one here. But let me just assure you that this actually has the least animal cruelty in the books that I read by Hideshi so far. It has one scene where animal cruelty gets assumed but not shown, and I think that this is definitely the tamest one. And if you are interested in just checking out Hideshi and you don't know where to start, maybe this could be a good intro point, because it does have his style, it tells you how he tells stories, but it's not as chaotic and brutal as other stories maybe. And then the collection Part 1, which turned out to be my favorite volume that I've read so far. This is a collection of even shorter stories comparable to a cabinet of curiosities. I could clearly see connections from this one to the other stories that I've read, especially to Red Snake. And for this I also discovered that there were actually some aspects and topics that Hideshi talks on that were autobiographical. For example, having a grandpa with a very hideous ward, having a twin brother that got observed by him while he was in the belly of his mother, which is a quite common thing. Having a grandma who thought she was a chicken, feelings of being isolated, being bullied by others because he was strange, and then also finding a mutual friend who views the world sort of in a similar way as he does. Lastly, I would love to talk about The Man Without Talent by Yoshiharu Tsuge. This, as well as the previous mangas, is partly an autobiographical story, at least to some extent. The genre that this book belongs to is called shishosetsu, and this describes an author's incorporation of real life events into a fictional story. This was a very popular manga form at the time that Tsuge released his mangas, and I know because I stumbled over those forums on the internet that there are ongoing discussions to this day on what actually is real in this story and what is not. But this is, as I said, the essence of this genre. The lines between reality and fiction, they just get blurred. Let's talk about this specific book though for a second. So this is actually a collection full of short stories that are more or less linked to each other. There's one ongoing story more towards the second half of the book where the main character stays the same, but in the beginning the main character, for example, isn't the same guy that we see at Continuum. simultaneously in the end, which is the one that is on the back of the book here. But the themes of these stories are definitely related to the later ones. For the most part though, the main character is a middle-aged man who used to be a somewhat successful mangaka, but who just doesn't want to draw anymore and tries to find new ways in making money. And one of the ways, for example, is by selling stones. The story has a sort of cynic undertone which can sometimes be comedic and sometimes really sad. We see the main character obviously repeatedly failing and struggling with money, making his situation worse, drawing away his family and slowly losing the connection to himself. I did read that this was the most approachable of Tsuge's story. I cannot really say anything on that because I have nothing to compare it to, but I can imagine it, since this is talking on topics that are very much relatable to a lot of people at the moment. Not really in the selling stones department, but more in the sense of what does it need for an individual to feel useful in the society that we are currently living in. Being useful in our society is something that is often equated with being valuable, which pressures us in achieving more and more things in order to justify our place in society. And if we don't accomplish that, we end up feeling self-conscious about it. And I appreciate this book so much in a way that it just says, but what if I want to sell stones? That's it with the wrap up for today. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're not, please consider to subscribe if you like this type of video. I wish you a great rest of your day, and I will see you at another time in another video. Bye!